It seems the fallout from the Parliament shenanigans started by Starmer last week isn't going away. In fact, all the worst aspects of political life are rearing its head. We had the abominable anti-Muslim rhetoric from Lee Anderson and Suella Braverman. But if you hadn't had enough negativity, don't worry. The Tories are always reliable in piling on more shit on top of the pre-existing shit. Rishi Sunak is seeking to halt demonstrations outside MPs' homes after telling senior police officers that the UK is descending into mob rule. In comments that have concerned civil liberties groups, the Prime Minister also demanded a crackdown on protest outside Parliament, political parties' offices, and town halls that may prevent use of a venue or cause alarm, harassment or distress. The move comes after a roundtable meeting with police chiefs on Wednesday in Downing Street to discuss how to handle the intimidation of MPs, candidates and councillors. Ministers have criticised regular mass protests, which have escalated over the Israel-Gaza conflict, and disruptive tactics used by groups such as Just Stop Oil. First of all, I wonder if this round table included civil liberties representatives, those that have organised protests themselves. I mean, let's keep this balanced, right? If the government and the police are going to be in this discussion, so should they, but I doubt they were. Now, in terms of banning protests outside houses of MPs, if I'm honest, that doesn't offend me that much. Although I recognise the hypocrisy of it all. I've seen the front door of Jeremy Corbyn's house more than anyone else. I mean, everyone's seen his house. I've seen his house more than even some of my own family. Of course, no one was bothered because, well, partly it was because it was Jeremy Corbyn himself, but also because it wasn't protesters. It was invasive journalists. Now, if you ask me, that is a problem. What does offend me is Sunak looking to clamp down on protests outside party offices, town halls, and Parliament, the literal hub of our political life. His justification is because Britain has descended into mob rule. Sunak shouldn't have suspended Lee Anderson because he clearly agrees with him. He was only booted out based on optics, but he's using the sort of mob rule propaganda line, which is incredibly dangerous. The only mob that rules this country is the bourgeoisie and its neoliberal servants from both political parties. Now, just like Anderson, Braverman, and others, Sunak is creating a lie in order to clamp down on dissent. MPs don't want to be held accountable. Now, one way of doing this is to create a myth that, that it's not ordinary people who want to engage in the political process, but radicals that seek to harm our politicians and institutions. This is necessary in order to facilitate the draconian laws we've seen from this government in recent years. Power doesn't give up power. Power naturally tries to solidify itself. It seeks to gain more power. When unchecked, all governments, regardless of the politics and ideology, will move this way. That's just a fact of life. Therefore, it's important for our freedoms that we have systems in place that challenge the government, that challenge power. I will defend your right to protest even if I disagree with you. Freedom isn't conditional. If you're really, really right-wing, I will defend your right to protest. And if it happens that these protests are what I call bigoted, I'd still defend the right to peacefully protest. But bear in mind, anti-racists and progressives will damn make sure they're heard too, and they will show up. But guess what? The political right doesn't give a toss about freedom. Where are the Julia Hartley-Brewers or the Mike Grahams of the world appalled at the government in introducing the crimes bill? Why didn't they support the people protesting that legislation? Do you think they'll be angry at the government's latest announcement? Of course not, because the right always banging on about free speech. They have never supported it ever. And it's always the progressives who are being targeted. The government thinks that hundreds of thousands of people marching against a genocide is a problem, that wanting to protect the planet is wrong. And the media plays a huge role in all of this. They give unequal parity to left and right-wing protest. I never hear about right-wingers marching, but it's always about Just Stop Oil or the ceasefire marches, which are largely framed in a negative way. But these protests are happening because the government is doing the wrong thing. If the government implements austerity, there's a wave of anti-austerity marches. We had legislation such as the Police Crime and Courts Bill over the last couple of years, clamping down on protests. People are out in their hundreds of thousands protesting a genocide, and instead of this government listening, they clamp down even further. You can avoid mass protests if you want such a horrible government. It's actually pretty simple. Now, this concern for safety and extremism, I think is a load of rubbish because the numbers don't suggest that. The actual numbers of arrests on Gaza protests would not seem to bear out the idea of mob rule. For example, there were 12 arrests at a demonstration in London on the 17th of February from a crowd estimated at more than 200,000 people. Now, that is a very, very small number. If you believe some people in the media, you'd be led to think that these marches are full of hateful anti-Semites, not a diverse group of people just standing up for humanity. Now, the whole discourse is about Islamism. Of course, extreme religious fundamentalists are an issue. No one should downplay that. The problem we have is the media and politicians are conflating pro-Palestinians with extreme Islamist terrorists, which is deliberate. Yet we never hear in the media about threats of far-right extremism, despite the facts showing it is increasing. While 15 years ago it was dominated by Islamist plotters, in recent years the most severe threats to the country's national security feature people planning atrocities linked to extreme right-wing ideology. The official figures are sobering. They reveal that the United Kingdom faces twin threats of terrorist violence from Islamists such as adherents of Islamic State and a far more disparate extremist far-right trying to trigger a race war to further their ideology. Since March 2017, counter-terrorism police and the intelligence services have stopped 32 plots they assess as aiming to cause mass casualties on British soil. Of these, they assess 18 were Islamist-related and 12 were triggered by extreme right-wing terrorist ideology. So given the rise in far-right hate crimes and terror plots, why isn't this talked about? It's because it's far easier to lean into the already prevalent Islamophobia in this country. Much of the media just naturally hate Muslims. It's not hard to see, it's everywhere. And for politicians, Muslims, as they have always been, are an easy scapegoat. This time is to take away all our freedoms. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and drop a comment. It's good for the algorithm and I'm interested in what you have to say. If you're not already subscribed, please do and hit the notification bell. You can also support this channel by becoming a member for 99p per month. And if you're feeling a little more generous, then you can support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month. This channel for a while has been uploading every single day, and it's quite a lot of work that is still voluntary and scheduled around my paid work. But I have so much ambition, expect in the future to see more variety in content, such as interviews and Vox Pops. But I want this to be a fully fledged media organisation where not only is this my full-time job, but to have multiple people working for Turn Left. I like to see a live show in the future, more content that delves into culture, history, and much more. But that can only be done if there's money. So please, if you can, support us in any way that's in your capacity. And thank you to existing members, subscribers, and patrons. See you next time.